I was 27 when my world collapsed in silence. No screaming. No slamming doors. No explanations. Just a cold morning, an empty apartment, and a note that read, "I'm sorry, Emily. I can't do this anymore." That was it. No signature. No goodbye kiss. Just the hollow echo of his absence, and the weight of life growing inside me. Nathan Hale, the man I loved. The man who swore forever while holding my trembling hands. The man who whispered promises under dim stars and built castles in my dreams, walked away like I was a burden he couldn't carry. And the worst part? He knew I was pregnant. I still remember the moment I told him. His expression had shifted, slightly, almost imperceptibly. But behind his charming smile, something inside him recoiled. I should have known then. I should have seen it coming. But love blinds even the strongest women. I waited for him. Every single day. Holding my belly. Whispering to the little life inside me that Daddy would come back. That he had to. But Nathan never did. While I battled nausea, fear, and shame, he started a new life. With another woman. Claire. Beautiful, polished Claire. The daughter of a senator. His perfect trophy wife. They got married within a year. They graced magazines. Photos of their golden smiles splashed across social media. Meanwhile, I was in a hospital room, alone, giving birth to a child who would never know his father's voice. That's when I died. Not physically. But the Emily who once believed in love, in people, she didn't make it past that delivery room. What rose instead was someone new. Someone quiet. Someone invisible. Someone with a single purpose, revenge. Not in a loud, dramatic way. Not with rage or noise. But methodical. Silent. Deadly. I disappeared from New York. Took my newborn, Aiden, and built a life in the shadows. I worked small jobs under fake names, changed states, changed identities, but every second of every day, I built a blueprint. A map of Nathan Hale's empire. His business. His secrets. His weaknesses. His lies. It took 6 years. 6 years of watching him grow, and studying how to destroy him. And now, I've returned. But not as Emily Carson. To the world, I'm Elena Gray, a powerful branding consultant with a sharp mind, a flawless accent, and a past nobody dares question. A ghost with elegance. Nathan doesn't recognize me. Of course, he doesn't. I wear heels now, speak softer, smile differently. The girl he left behind no longer exists. But behind my calm eyes, I am watching every move he makes. And I'm already inside. His company needed a rebranding specialist to save a spiraling campaign, and I happened to be the miracle. Now, I work directly with him. Every meeting, every handshake, every conversation, I'm building his trust again, just to dismantle it. His ego? I feed it. His pride? I polish it. His secrets? He whispers them to me without even realizing. And Claire? She's kind. Naive. Pregnant with their first child. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But this isn't about mercy. This is about justice. And when justice is denied, revenge becomes righteous. What Nathan doesn't know is that I've already planted seeds of doubt inside his home. Aiden, our son, has enrolled in the school across from their gated mansion. He doesn't know who Nathan is. Not yet. But fate will handle that revelation. For now, my war is quiet. A war of whispers. Of leaked documents. Of manipulated partnerships. Of making Nathan trust me, so I can take everything from him. Step by step. His empire will bleed. His marriage will wither. And when the truth begins to rot beneath his feet, he'll finally feel what I felt. But this time, I won't be the one walking away. I'll be the one standing in the shadows, holding the match, watching it all burn. I was the flame, and he hadn't even noticed the room growing warmer. Each morning I walked into his office dressed in sophistication, but underneath the tailored clothes was the girl who once begged him not to leave. The same girl who cried herself to sleep with one hand on her belly and the other reaching out for a ghost. But now, I didn't flinch when he laughed. I didn't melt when he complimented my work. I kept my mask on, flawless and untouchable. Because the game had only just begun. Nathan's company, Hale Ventures, was bleeding money, quietly. A poor acquisition, a few unethical shortcuts, and some hidden lawsuits buried under layers of legal protection. But what he didn't know was that his greatest threat was the woman sitting across the boardroom table from him. Every night, I sifted through company files using access he had personally granted me. Every flaw I discovered, I documented, saving it not to fix, but to expose. Slowly. Strategically. Not all at once. Destruction isn't just about breaking, it's about watching something collapse in slow motion. Claire trusted me too. She invited me into her home. A dinner. A garden party. A private consultation. I learned about her pregnancy before Nathan did. I smiled and placed a hand on her belly as she glowed with joy, and I felt nothing. Because she was happy in the life built from my pain. But fate is patient. I arranged a charity gala, supposedly for rebranding PR. In reality, it was a calculated step. I knew who to invite, which media companies to alert, and which investors to lure in. I also invited someone very special. Aiden. He stood at the edge of the crowd, holding the hand of a friend of mine, a woman who had helped raise him like her own. He wore a tiny black tuxedo and looked at Nathan from a distance. There was no recognition. Just curiosity. And Nathan paused. He stared for a long second. Something flickered in his expression. I saw the crack. "Who's that kid?" he asked casually. I tilted my head. "Just a guest." "Cute, isn't he?" He nodded, slowly. But his eyes lingered. Somewhere, some part of him was remembering. And that's what I wanted. Not clarity. Not confrontation. Doubt. Let the ghost of the past whisper to him while I rearranged his future. It took another 3 months before the second phase began. Emails began to leak. Old affair rumors resurfaced. Tax documents started showing inconsistencies. Partners withdrew. Media questioned. Board members panicked. And in the eye of the storm, I remained calm. Because no one suspected me. Because no one remembered Emily Carson. Because I had become Elena Gray, the woman fixing everything, while secretly pulling every nail from the foundation. Nathan's empire began crumbling brick by brick. And still, he trusted me. He asked for my advice. He drank the coffee I handed him. He signed the documents I placed before him. All while believing I was the answer, not the architect of his ruin. But this wasn't just about his company. No. This was about what he loved now. Claire. She had once been the innocent third party. But innocence doesn't erase complicity. She had built her marriage on a man who abandoned someone vulnerable. She had taken what was never truly hers. So I became her friend. Listened to her fears. Watched her begin to doubt her husband as the world collapsed around them. "I feel like he's hiding something," she whispered one night. I smiled gently. "Maybe he is. Men like Nathan always are." I left a single old photo in her mailbox a week later. A sonogram. With my name barely faded. She never spoke of it. But her silence told me she knew. She was putting the puzzle together, slowly. The woman her husband had destroyed, the woman no one had heard from again, the woman who vanished, was back. And when the time came, when everything was falling, I took Aiden's hand and walked into Nathan's office, unannounced. He looked up. Saw the child. Saw me. His face changed. He stood up. Emily. That was the moment. Not of recognition, but of collapse. Everything he'd ignored came rushing back. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I simply said, while I was fighting to stay alive carrying your child, you were with someone else. Now you're alive, but every breath you take is part of the revenge I planned. And then I walked away. Behind me, the sound of his empire dying wasn't loud. It was the quiet undoing of a man who thought abandonment was freedom. He had lost everything: his name, his company, his wife, his future. And I had gained peace. The girl who once broke in silence had become the storm. Nathan stared at the photos scattered across his office desk, photos of Aiden. His eyes trembled, scanning the face of a little boy he'd passed countless times in the hallways of the school across from his home, never realizing, never knowing. The boy had his chin, his eyes, even the tilt of his smile. Emily had made sure he'd see them like this. No warning. No message. Just a box dropped off at the front desk, urgent, for Mr. Hale's eyes only. Inside were 7 years of secrets: birth certificates, DNA results, time-stamped photos, school reports, and a letter in that haunting handwriting. While you built an empire on lies, I was raising the truth. Aiden is yours. But he'll never call you father. His knees weakened, and for a moment, he couldn't breathe. Claire called his name from the hallway, gentle, excited, still glowing from the morning's ultrasound appointment. But Nathan couldn't speak. Couldn't even look her in the eyes. Because now, she was part of the war too. And Emily had only just begun. Emily watched from a distance. Not with joy. Not with malice. But with resolve. She had let Nathan live in peace for 7 years. Let him sleep beside his trophy wife, let him eat dinners on marble counters while she ate instant noodles in rundown apartments. Let him smile. But now, he'd learn what it felt like to unravel, piece by piece. The fall had to be slow. That was the only way it would hurt. His company's stocks began to slide. Anonymous leaks. Misplaced documents. Clients pulled out last minute with vague excuses. Behind every coincidence was Emily. Nathan grew paranoid. Started snapping at assistants, triple-checking meetings, second-guessing allies. Claire noticed it too, the way his hands shook, the cold sweat in his sleep. And Emily was there, in the boardroom, in the hallway, sometimes even beside Claire at charity events. Always calm. Always supportive. Always smiling. She was the confidant he didn't realize was his executioner. Then came phase 2. Using his ego against him. Emily proposed a merger. A lucrative, strategic expansion through her own brand identity firm, which, on the surface, seemed like a gift from heaven during Hale Enterprises' downturn. Nathan saw it as a lifeline. A woman from nowhere offering him rescue. His pride couldn't refuse. He signed everything. Blinded by desperation. And ego. And with one stroke of a pen, Emily now controlled 51% of Hale Enterprises' public image. Legally. Quietly. He didn't read the fine print. He never read anything when he thought he was in control. Meanwhile, Claire grew curious. She found an old envelope tucked behind a drawer, Aiden's photo, an address in Brooklyn, a birth certificate with Nathan's name. That night, she confronted her husband. And the silence in the room said everything. Emily received a call that same evening. Claire. Tears in her voice. Anger, confusion, and guilt. You lied to me, she whispered. You let me live with a man who destroyed a woman. Who abandoned his own child. I was pregnant when I married him. If I had known. I wouldn't. Emily stopped her gently. He lied to both of us. They met days later. In secret. Not as enemies. Not as rivals. But as two women betrayed by the same man. Claire had believed in fairy tales. Emily had survived the nightmare. Now, they would write the ending, together. Nathan's public unraveling began quietly. A tweet. A whisper. An anonymous blog detailing years of misconduct, unethical deals, abandoned families. Within days, news outlets picked it up. Then came the viral clip, a leaked security recording showing Nathan yelling at an intern, shoving a junior associate, then slurring a denial on camera during a press event. Emily had compiled it all. She had built the storm. And now it was raining. Hale Enterprises' stock plummeted. Board members resigned. Major clients cut ties. The media tore him apart. Nathan Hale, once the golden boy of Manhattan business, was now a headline of disgrace. And all the while, Emily watched. Not from behind a screen. But from across the table. He still didn't know she was Emily. Not yet. But that moment was coming. Nathan didn't sleep for 3 nights. He sat in his penthouse office, lights dim, whiskey untouched, laptop open to an endless stream of headlines. He didn't know that woman was sitting just floors below him, tightening the final screws of his ruin. Emily walked past his office that morning, heels clicking softly. He didn't see her, but the moment was symbolic. The man who once walked away from her now sat shattered behind glass, powerless, and utterly alone. But her war wasn't finished. Not until she looked him in the eye and told him who she really was. That time was coming. But first, there was one last crack she needed to make, the one in his heart. Claire had quietly moved into a hotel. She told the world it was for space, but in truth, it was distance from a man who no longer felt like a husband. She didn't tell Nathan that she had met Emily. Didn't tell him she knew everything. Instead, she watched. Watched him spiral. Watched him scream into his phone, watched him throw things when meetings failed, watched him bury his head in his hands like a boy too scared to take responsibility. And slowly, she began documenting. Recording phone calls. Taking photos. Forwarding documents. She was no longer his wife. She was Emily's silent witness. Together, they built the final portfolio, a digital dossier of every lie Nathan ever lived. And it was almost ready. Emily hadn't seen Aiden in 3 days. She stood outside his school now, watching from her car. He ran in circles with his classmates, laughing, his dark brown curls bouncing with every step. Aiden had no idea who Nathan was. No idea what his mother was doing behind the scenes. But one day, she'd tell him. Not now. Not while he was still young, still innocent. But one day, when he was strong enough, she'd tell him how his mother turned silence into power. How his very existence reminded her not to give up when she wanted to disappear. He was her purpose. Her reason. And now, her revenge was almost complete. The day of reckoning arrived with silver invitations and false smiles. The Hale Foundation's annual charity gala, the most glamorous night of the year. Claire would attend, perfectly dressed, smiling beside Nathan. Cameras would flash, wine would pour, and the media would pretend his world hadn't just crumbled. But that night, Emily would rip off the mask. She arrived in black. Elegant. Unrecognizable. People whispered her name, Elena Gray, the woman who saved Hale Enterprises. Nathan greeted her like a lost brother. Kissed her hand. Held her arm too long. Emily smiled. He had no idea he was about to walk into his own eulogy. The presentation began with lights dimming. The big screen flickered on. Nathan stood at the podium, smug, trying to salvage his reputation with charm and charisma. And then, the screen changed. Not to the slideshow he expected. But to him, yelling at staff, storming out of meetings, audio clips of him mocking Aiden's mother, calling her a mistake I corrected. Gasps filled the room. Nathan froze. Claire stepped out of the shadows and took the stage. She held up her phone. Everything you just saw, she said, voice strong, was real. I've lived beside this man for 7 years. And I don't recognize him anymore. The crowd erupted. Flashbulbs exploded. Nathan turned toward Emily, panic in his eyes, lips trembling. Elena, he began. But she stepped forward. And for the first time in over 7 years, she said her real name out loud. It's Emily. Emily Carson. The woman you left alone while pregnant with your son. The woman you erased. His mouth opened. No sound came. You built a kingdom on my pain, she said, her voice cold, calm. Tonight, it falls. The audience didn't know what to do. Some stared in horror. Others began filming. Board members whispered. Sponsors stepped back. And Nathan, the man who once had it all, stood frozen as everything around him shattered. Emily met him alone in his empty office afterward. He sat on the floor, defeated, a bottle beside him. You were dead, he muttered. You disappeared. No, she said. I was saving myself. And saving our son. Nathan looked up, hollow. You destroyed me. No, Emily replied, stepping closer. You destroyed yourself. I just held up the mirror. She left him there. No more threats. No more anger. Just truth. That night, the Hale empire was over. Sponsors withdrew. Lawsuits followed. His face vanished from magazines, replaced with scandal. Emily walked home alone under the stars, not as a broken woman. Not even as a victor. But as a mother. As a symbol. She picked up Aiden from his babysitter, held him close, and whispered. We did it. But her revenge wasn't fully done yet. Because Nathan still had one thing left. His son. Emily sat in the quiet of her apartment, watching Aiden sleep. His small hand curled against his cheek, his breath soft and slow. 7 years. 7 years of survival, sacrifice, and planning, for this moment. But the strange thing about revenge is that once you get it, you're left with something more terrifying than hatred, silence. There was no more enemy to chase. No more monster to destroy. Nathan Hale had already lost everything, his name, his company, his wife. He had become a ghost inside a city that once worshipped him. And yet, Emily felt nothing. Not relief. Not joy. Not even peace. Just emptiness. She was leaving New York. Moving to Boston with her child. She couldn't raise a baby in the shadow of scandal. She had been offered a new job, and she planned to disappear, much like Emily once did. Thank you, she whispered on the call. For telling me the truth. For letting me see him for what he really was. You didn't deserve what he did to you either, Emily replied. There was a long pause. What about Aiden? Claire asked. Emily hesitated. He still doesn't know who his father is. Claire's voice softened. Will you ever tell him? Emily looked at her son, his innocent face, the way he smiled without shadows in his eyes. I don't know. Reporters tried to chase him, but he stopped answering calls. Investors distanced themselves. Former friends turned their backs. He rented a single-room apartment in a run-down Brooklyn neighborhood. The man who once wore tailored suits now sat in stained shirts, counting coins for coffee. And every time he looked in the mirror, he saw Emily, not her face, but her strength. The reminder that she, the woman he discarded, had become the storm that ended him. He didn't cry. But inside, he was hollowed out, gutted. And the one thing that hurt most wasn't the company. It wasn't even Claire. It was Aiden. The child he had never held. the son he abandoned before he even arrived. That absence was now a wound he couldn't heal. Delivered without a name. Just a plain envelope in Nathan's mailbox. Inside, a photograph of Aiden at 7, smiling at his school play, dressed as a little lion. And beneath it, a single sentence in Emily's handwriting. You don't deserve to know him. But he deserves to know the truth. Nathan read it 20 times. Then once more. And then he broke. It was shaky. Quiet. Full of words that came too late. Emily, it's me. Nathan. I don't know why I'm calling. Maybe I just need you to hear what I never had the courage to say. I was scared. When you told me you were pregnant, I felt trapped. Like my life was ending. I thought walking away would give me freedom, but all it did was chain me to guilt. I don't want your forgiveness. I wouldn't forgive me either. But if you ever tell Aiden about me, tell him I was a coward who paid the price. And tell him I loved him. Even if I was too much of a monster to show it. He ended the call without goodbye. Emily didn't cry. But something inside her shifted. Emily took Aiden to the park, the same one she used to sit in while searching job boards on her old cracked phone. He played with the other kids, laughing, fearless. A man sat on the opposite bench. Thin. Quiet. Tired. Nathan. He didn't approach. Didn't even look directly at them. He just sat, close enough to see his son smile once. Emily stood up. Her heart pounding. She hadn't seen him since that night in his office. Now, he was a ghost of a man. Their eyes met. And for the first time, she saw no pride. No arrogance. Just a father, broken, watching from afar. She walked toward him slowly. He didn't move. You shouldn't be here, she said. I know. Silence. Then Emily asked the one question that had haunted her for years. Did you ever love me? Nathan looked up, not angry. Not defensive. Just honest. Yes. But not enough to be the man you needed. That was the truth. The whole, ugly truth. Emily took a breath, then nodded. Aiden will never know what you did. But he will know who I became. Nathan lowered his head. Good. She turned and walked away, never looking back. Aiden turned 14. He asked Emily one day, casually, while walking home from school. Mom, why don't I have a dad like the other kids? Emily stopped. The question finally came. She knelt beside him and took a deep breath. Because some people walk away when they're scared. But when that happened, I didn't run. I fought. I stayed. And everything we have today is because I refused to let that pain destroy us. Aiden thought for a moment. Is he alive? Yes. Do I need to meet him? Emily smiled gently. No. You already know everything that matters. They walked home in silence, not the heavy kind, but peaceful. Emily had finally let go of the weight. Not because Nathan deserved forgiveness. But because Aiden deserved a mother who was free. He left me when I was most fragile, pregnant, scared, abandoned. I could have stayed broken. I could have disappeared. But I rose. I became the storm that shook his world. I didn't just take revenge. I became a story mothers tell their daughters. That strength doesn't come from being loved. It comes from surviving when you're left alone. He thought I was weak. But I became the reason for his ultimate downfall.